Now, Marnie Webb is a prominent nonprofit technology leader and social innovator, currently serving as the CEO of TechSoup. And if you're not familiar with it, I'm sure that will be part of his presentation. With over 30 years of experience, she has built solutions for significant community impact. Previously, Marnie was the CEO of Caravan Studios, a division of TechSoup, where she led the development of technology interventions addressing issues such as human trafficking, food insecurity, and youth poverty in the United States, Brazil, and Qatar. She has also served as the co-CEO of TechSoup Global, distributing over $600 million in donated technology to NGOs worldwide. She is going to play Oprah and hand out about $100 million of technology to you all today. She is recognized as one of the top 10 Silicon Valley influencers by the San Jose Mercury News, a sought-after writer and speaker on innovation, community, and the social web. Her pioneering work includes launching TechSoup's NetSquared initiative, empowering developers and organizers globally to create tech-driven social solutions. And in 2008, way back in 2008, she was named N10 Person of the Year and was included in the Nonprofit Times list of the 50 most influential leaders in the U.S. nonprofit sector, probably the only one with that distinction in the room today. Anybody else want to reveal themselves? No. Without further ado, Marnie.
Tech folks can get us back to the slideshow view. That would be awesome. So my mother is actually ChatGPT and wrote that introduction. Okay, so you can see slide number 2. Hello? Hello? It's nice to meet all of you. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much. It's nice to meet all of you. I am, as Barry said, I'm Marnie Webb. I'm currently the CEO of TechSoup, and I'm also still the CEO of our product development division, Caravan Studios. And at TechSoup, I have the privilege and pleasure of working with all of these wonderful people so that we can make sure nonprofits all around the world have the technology they need to do their job. We do that by, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We do that by working with companies like as diverse as Microsoft and Google and Okta and all kinds of corporations and foundations to manage donations and discounts. But what we're leaning into even more day in and day out is helping organizations use the technology they already have, right? Because the technology, you get it once now and you don't get it again. There's not a new version that comes out. You know, it's Thursday, so you get new technology whenever you log on. And we're seeing these novel technologies like AI being built into the tools, and we have to figure out how to use them. So we're looking more and more with how do we help you do that, you know, and how do we provide ongoing support. And I want to be upfront in this talk that I have an agenda, and I like to be super clear about what my agenda is, and that it's that I want to make sure all of you can use the whole range of tools that are available to you. Because so often when we talk about AI, we mean the kind of magic that, like magic trick feeling of generative AI that Brian was showing us earlier, you know, but AI also includes algorithms. You know, it includes support with crunching numbers. It includes looking at vast data sets and finding anomalies in those data sets. You know, so it's a whole wide range of things that's being built in the tools. It's interesting. I was recently at a event that Microsoft had, and one of the features that they have in M365 that I love the best is something called Delve. And they're actually taking that out, and it's just built into the AI now. It works no different than it ever has, right? It's just in this interface that allows us to talk to our machines, whether we're doing it by typing in natural language or whether we're doing it by actually talking to the machines. It's that interaction and that back and forth that has changed how we're working with computers, and that's pretty interesting, actually. So one of the things when we think about technology adoption in nonprofits, we're thinking about not just about how you acquire the technology, but what makes it actually useful to you inside your organization on a day-to-day basis. And our research shows us that about 53% of organizations, the reason they change to a new technology is because the old one has become obsolete, just doesn't exist anymore. You have to move to the new one. You don't have a choice. You know, it might be a new version of the new one. That's what we see forced the movement to the cloud, right? A combination of on-premise technology becoming obsolete and COVID moved nonprofit organizations into the cloud. And then the recommendations of your peers. And so, you know, that's where things like this are wonderful events because it pulls peers together to talk about stories, how they are and aren't using it. And I think things like the kind of prompt library that Brian was talking about, I'd love to build that up for us as a community. If you're working in food security, how do we make an awesome prompt library for organizations working in food security? So you aren't just learning inside your organization, but you're learning across organizations. And with the magic of translation and how much that's improving with AI, can we do that across languages and across borders so that we have an opportunity of learning at a really accelerated pace? And, you know, we think about that a lot at the community level, and we have some things that my colleague Shasta and I can both talk to you about, you know, that get at that. But I think it's also worth thinking about inside your community and with the community foundations and other family foundations and associations that are here as well. So what I want to share today are 5 practices to help you think about the organizational adoption of technology. I'm not talking about playing with the tool, so you start to get a feeling for it and understand how it supports your individual productivity. I am talking about what you need to do to make a difference inside your organization around it. And I'm going to helpfully number all of these so that you know how far along I am in this presentation and when we're going to roll to the end. So the first one is to engage team members in trainings before you grant licenses. Licenses are expensive. Yes, they're $20 a month, they're $30 a month. You have to pay for them a year up front in most cases, so it's a real investment. And, you know, the regular adoption cycle when people try to adopt novel technologies is they go in, they play with it, so you have all this use, and then they're like, didn't change the world. And so they gradually stop using it. Getting them some training first so they get that playing out of the way before they start using the technology is a really valuable thing to get them rolling. I also want to say something about the technology that I think that you should adopt if you're not that technical and you're really at this early stage. How many of you have Microsoft as your general M365? Okay, you guys should adopt Copilot. How many of you have Google? You should adopt Gemini. You've already trusted those companies with your data. You've already have a license with them. You've already set up an organizational tenant. Microsoft particularly stakes its reputation as a business on the fact that your stuff is your stuff. You know? And so, and Google a little bit differently because they haven't been in the business of serving businesses for as long, you know, but they equally are staking their reputation on that. So you pick one of those two. You know, if you're using Salesforce and that's where most of your data is, use their tool. But in all of those instances, your team has already made a decision to trust that company with private data. So stick with them. So that's, and then when you have more of a use case, you can start thinking about what else you might use and how to get out of that. 2. Work with cross-organizational squads to develop use cases. So what Brian went through was an awesome use case. How can we develop a better system for more quickly writing grants? Right? That's an awesome use case. Building out what he showed would take time from your teams. What grants are the right grants to give it as an example? What programs are right? Do we actually have the program documentation written? What many of us in the nonprofit world probably would have added to the corpus of material used in that particular example was monitoring and evaluation reports from other grants, right? Because we want to feed that in. We might have used a year in review kind of report from the foundation or from ourselves, right? So that takes some time to figure out what you want in there. You probably have some budgets that you want to share. You probably want the budgets that you shared with the foundation and the budget that you actually tracked when you realized you didn't ask them for enough money. You probably want both of those budgets to share, right? To help improve your ability to write grants. So developing those use cases take time. It really supports the adoption because rather than your grant writers sitting there individually playing with it, they're thinking about how is this a tool for the organization. If you're any kind of organization that runs a help or a support desk, like, you know there's probably a gap between the material your staff looks up or your volunteers look up before they answer a question and the questions that are actually asked. And that gap gets filled by Slack messages. I just got asked this. Does somebody know the answer? It gets filled by email. So you could have a use case where you're bringing people together and saying, let's analyze the content that's missing from our support, information and provide it. That's not to turn AI onto the people that are calling for help. There's a huge value in them still getting to talk to a human being and having that connection, but it helps that human being get to a better answer faster. So that instead of spending their time on the phone saying, hang on, and hurriedly looking for content, they're spending that time talking to the person that they're talking to. You can tell how old I am by my miming of phone. But those use cases, before they start working on them, have them start thinking about it and defining them. 3, set up structures for those squads and individuals to report on their progress. They're not going to solve it right away. They're going to have missteps and false starts. That's okay. You want a structure that lets them talk about what they're learning and how it's going, because that helps you learn as an organization. For many of the organizations TechSoup serves, when I say organization, I'm talking about 2-3 people. So learning as an organization may feel like, we know, because we are also the squad. And that's where communities of purpose and practice can be really helpful, because it can give you those folks outside of your organization to talk to. You have to have trusted environment and agreement, because you may be revealing things that didn't go the way you meant them to go. But that's a valuable part of learning, and it's a valuable part of learning across the community. 4, implement the best of what you've learned across the organization. So up till now, we're piloting stuff. We're learning. We're sharing those learnings, and we're moving forward. We're saying, oh, we did all this stuff for the grant, and the grant it wrote was terrible. Why? My favorite grant that I wrote is from 4 years ago. I'm not doing the same thing anymore. I didn't share. So now I learned something. My data has to be up to date, or I have to correct it, or I might not be able to share a whole grant. I might have to cut and paste parts of it so it's the relevant parts, right? That's okay. But when you get to the spot where you're like, okay, this is working reliably as an organization, you start implementing it. The suggestion of creating a prompt library is a great one. That may be how you implement it, but you also might implement things that you learned, in other ways. So I'll give you a quick example. One of the things that happens, so many of you have probably had the experience where you log on and you're looking for a document and you're thinking, what was that document called? Who sent it to me? Which folder is it in? Did I get it in April? And you're trying to figure out, and you're putting in a comment, I think Cameron sent it to me. I think it had something to do with Cisco, and she's been gone for 2 years. So wait, she's just a deleted user now. She doesn't have a name, and you can't find it, right? Super hard to find it, even with the awesome search tools that exist. Let me tell you what, AI is awesome finding it. AI is awesome finding it, and you might not want it found. Because what it also finds is everybody's reviews that were insecurely stored and shared. Because we're bad about documents as humans. We email them to each other. We download them onto our machine. We're like, oh, I don't want to lose that version, so I'm going to save it to my file. And we get ours. And then when our colleagues leave, we get theirs, right? Because it's all online. And we get all the people whose stuff they got, we get those too. So you get stuff from people you didn't even know ever worked for the organization. And because we're bad, because we emailed those people their reviews, because we stuck a copy in our thing to work on it, we end up with that stuff in insecure places inside the organization. So I think those kinds of learnings, Like nobody should think that TechSoup ever had the problem I just described with a real past employee, by the way. However, but those problems, AI surfaces those kinds of document problems and document history problems. Share that too, because that helps you learn and get better as an organization and think about what you need to invest in and what you need to train. So it's not just when you're implementing the best of what you've learned, some of that is by saying, and don't implement this, right? Because it'll be the things you shouldn't repeat and learn. And we've all seen, horror stories of some of those. There was a Guardian article from a couple of years ago now about an organization that provided support to help desk support to people with eating disorders that turned on a chat bot. But because it was trained on the corpus of the internet and not the organization's information, the advice it gave the human being that called, or it was text, it wasn't called, it wasn't voice, was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. There's a more recent story about a teenager that ended up in what they thought was a therapeutic conversation that went, tragically awry. And so I think in most cases, we as nonprofits, we want to stay the interface, because we're often helping people that for whatever reason couldn't access that support in other ways, for whatever reason, whatever their reasons are, and so we're that. But what AI can be is our back pocket superpower, man. The thing that makes us faster, the things that makes us more confident, the thing that, all of us think, I should be documenting this. I should share with my colleagues what I learned. I was just at this awesome event in Austin, and I am missing one of our leadership team meetings because of it. But I've learned so much already, and I want to be able to share that. And I'm not going to have time. I'm like in my math, I'm always doing plane flight math. Like the flight home is 3 hours. How much can I do in that flight? And you have that. That's a place where AI is wonderful, actually. And so those are some of the things that you should be learning and implementing in your organization too. The ability to document processes, share learning, and be more communicative. At TechSoup, we're already seeing it make our organization more equitable. We have a lot of staff that aren't native English speakers, or their native language is Polish, actually. We have a big office in Poland. All of a sudden, they're contributing much faster to written information across the organization. And so we're already seeing it start to level the playing field in key ways for folks. And it's been interesting. It'll be interesting as we continue that. 5, so this is the last one. I think that to use these tools well, because they change so fast, because we are in this exponential growth period, you have to develop a culture of interrogation and retros inside of your organization to be able to use these. So what does that mean? It means you're constantly going back and saying, is this still the right tool? Did they change their user license? Are they doing something different around data and privacy than they were doing before? How do we feel about it? One of the things I worry about a lot is that AI will make our organizational writing more plastic. That thing that happens when you're reading writing and you're like, really a human? Or the poor woman with those hands, in that too many thumbs in that video. Those kinds of things, you want to constantly be checking for that, because I believe part of our job as civil society is to make the world bigger and more accessible for people that probably aren't well represented in the corpus of material that those large language models are using. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure we're not resting too much on those, and that we are contributing our own data and our own inferences and our own insights into it and working on it. And it's easy to stop doing it and then all of a sudden realize you've drifted away from what you believe some of your core values may be. I think also, a culture of retrospectives is where you build a system inside your organization. So you go back and at the end of it, you say, okay, how did that work for everybody? And the 3 questions that are often used at retros are, what should we keep doing? What in this thing worked was awesome, we should do it again. What should we stop doing? It may not even be that it's bad. You just get done and you're like, we didn't actually need that step. We don't think it made any material difference to us. And then what did you not do that you believe you should do next time? And the thing I love about retros is they aren't just like grading a project, or they aren't doing the thing that can be so easy to do sometimes where you just are like, it failed, throw it away, go, to the next thing. And instead is a way to talk about it so that you're keeping what works and you understand why things did not. That QR code takes you to a Google Drive folder that has this presentation in it, guidance on how to do retros, an example of how to create a user case study, and a couple of other documents inside it. You should all be able to. I made my daughter test it last night, so awesome. So you should all be able to get in there. There's a document hopefully called README that has the links in it and describes what's there. If I get time on the 3-hour flight home, I'm going to actually add one more document to it that gives a little guidance for developing communities of practice and participating in them. I think it's really important that those are safe spaces and well described, because you want people don't learn if they can't say what they got wrong, and that can be really hard to do. So anyway, in so much as you'll also find Shesta's and my contact information in there. You can feel free to email us, connect to us on LinkedIn, and some other resources that TechSoup specifically has that will support your use on it. In general, I think we really do have an opportunity to harness the range of digital solutions. I think instead of waiting for it to happen to us, we have an opportunity to participate in it, but we have to do it because we're in dialogue and community with one another, and not just because we're waiting for something magic to come out that like does the dishes and writes a grant proposal and manages the volunteers. All right, that's it. It was 5 things. I'm done. So I think the question is, at what point in the pipeline should I be involved, and how much should you add it to your organization? So I'm going to start with the second part first. How much should you add it to your organization? There's an organization called Project Evident. They actually just did an event in Austin not that long ago, and they have a way of thinking about where you are on the AI adoption curve. Like, are you bleeding edge? Are you a fast follower? Are you, I don't know what the next one is, but somehow reluctant, probably is it, wait and see. And I think you have to pick what your tolerance is as an organization to be able to answer that question. I think a lot of organizations probably would put themselves in the fast follower or wait and see category, and that's okay. But you still have to think about how you're learning and keeping going. But it's an interesting exercise because it helps provide guidance about what to expect and what to use. I think the exercise of doing use cases is actually really helpful for a few reasons. So the way that they seem to be being most successful, like when you look at some of the research and landscape reviews, is that the use cases also, one, people hash out across teams, and that can be helpful, right? Because they decide what's going to help the most. But you can also decide as an organization, we only have the capacity to do 3 of these right now. And then you as organizations leaders, or as an executive committee, or whatever is appropriate, the board, whatever is appropriate to the organization, can go in and help prioritize. But I don't think there's one answer to it, right? Because a small organization that's providing legal services might do a lot of AI, right? The law has a tremendous amount of well-structured data in the form of legal briefs and case law and everything else that can be used. And that could be awesome. A giant organization that does community gardens all over the place, maybe not. So I don't think there's like a size or issue area, answer. I think it's really a choice for your organization. Yes, sir. So one of the things that we're doing, I said at TechSoup, one of the things that we're working on is we're working to support organizations with technology they already have. Our problem, like many nonprofits' problems, is how do you afford to do that? How do we afford to staff that and provide ongoing support? So we've started a small membership, what is right now a small membership community, about, 1,200 organizations in it, all told. That's a paid membership that provides an opportunity for deeper engagement with some of our own staff, and also through the engagement with other folks like Willie, It provides an opportunity for us to work more deeply inside of communities and provide ongoing support. There are a few options for how organizations join Quad. One is paying the annual fees, $200. And the other one is, we're looking to build up funding, actually, so we can sort of provide scholarships to organizations. But it helps provide support for us in doing more directed learning. So if you imagine a much more specific version of this talk for 10 organizations, helping them develop use cases or set up a community of practice, that's the kind of thing that we do there. And it's not just about AI, it's about the wide range of technology. So we talk a lot about Google AdWords, man. Because that's such a big tool that nonprofits use and need help with.